She's inside the house. That's weird because now I hear the echo on your side and
Well, luckily, none of this is going in there.
oh, or this is gonna be the cold open. You don't know.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yaniz Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob.
And this is Kai.
On this episode, we're going to be talking about, well, what are we talking about? Basically, inspired by the release of Ocean's 8, touching base once again on women in film, which is really, it's been a big topic, especially this week with the release of Ocean's 8 and then, all the drama that's been going on in the Star Wars fan community. But we'll get to that in a second. So, first of all, sort of a little bit of housekeeping. Last episode, Kai, you and I broke down our love of Riverdale. And we should probably point out, too, if the audio sounds different, that's because we're in the same house and I'm trying a new recording technique over Skype. So Kai's just in the other room while I'm recording here in the other part of the house. So if you notice any discrepancies audio-wise, that's what that's about. So last week we talked about Riverdale. And I sort of teased that we were going to be watching Josie and the Pussycats, which I just had to go ahead and purchase on DVD. So Kai, I guess let's follow up on our Riverdale conversation and sort of tie that up until season 3 at least. What did you think of Josie and the Pussycats? Of course, we're talking about the 2001 film starring Rachel Lee Cook, Tara Reid, and Rosario Dawson.
Well, I have seen the movie before. I actually saw the movie theater when it came out in 2001, April 11, 2001, more specifically. We looked it up. And
that would be creepy if you had that memorized.
Yeah, because I'm Josie and the Pussycats is my jam.
Well,
so
but
I have to know
you also have like an encyclopedic knowledge of dates.
Yeah, that's true
it's
too.
Kind of creepy. Go ahead. Sorry.
But no. So I saw the movie in the movie theater with a friend of mine, and I think at the time, like, I didn't like the movie. I don't know if I really liked the movie itself, but I really liked the soundtrack. In fact, me and my friend went and bought the soundtrack, and I listened to it constantly. But I think it was just, I didn't get it. Like, it went over my head, because then when we watched it today, I did see what I'd read about in more recent years about this movie and about the product placement was kind of a parody, and I think the subliminal messaging was actually in a way is ahead. It's ahead of its time, because that's clearly very exaggerated, but and probably not even happening. Who knows? But I think it was an interesting way of saying that any trend that comes out, a teenager is going to just gobble it up.
Well, and it's interesting in the 17 years since the movie's release, it has sort of developed a little bit of a cult following, and people have come to appreciate it as a satire of consumerism and pop culture. And I always talk about Last Action Hero, which I think is similarly bombed at the box office, probably because people didn't really get exactly the subversiveness it was going for. But it the product placement sort of feeds into the storyline of the subliminal messages and the music and all that, because you're watching it, and they even reference that late in the movie, talking about, oh, we actually found out, spoilers, I guess, we actually found out that movies work better for subliminal messages. Meanwhile, we've been watching a movie with product placement throughout literally every scene. So, it's sort of poking fun at itself. In just for the record, none of that product placement, like, there was no actual deals with any of those companies. That was just like them sort of embellishing the theme of the film and really embracing that satirical element of it. Right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's also what you were telling me too, because you've heard a lot about Josie and the Pussycats, and you've told me some of those things.
Well, they've done, they did an episode on Blank Check podcast, which is a show I really enjoy every week. Actually, I look forward to that. So definitely check that out, listeners, if you haven't heard that already. They have basically follow filmographies, and they just did Josie and the Pussycats as a one-off. But I, as someone who really likes Rosario Dawson and was sucked into the whole Total Request Live, She's All That, and like all the late 90s, early 2000s. It did feel very much like a time capsule. I mean, Rachel Lee Cook is in the lead role. That's all you need to say. To be like, oh, that's of a very specific time in Hollywood where, Rachel Lee Cook was a leading actress,
And I think she did pretty well in this movie.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to add is I just really could not stand the Tara Reid character named Melody. She was just so stupid. It got on my nerves. I don't like that dumb blonde part.
It's a cliche. It's a trope. Yeah, I know. They have to. That's their shorthand for making each of the Pussycats their own distinct personality. Josie is the leader, and Valerie is like the smart, like sharper one, and then Melody's just kind of the doofus, I guess, of the group. Kind of, and I even made this comparison when we were watching the movie, very similar to Mean Girls, where each of the plastics have a kind of fulfill those same roles. But I mean, Alan Cumming is great in it, and like you said, the music is a lot of fun. It's if you're watching it from a very specific perspective of knowing what you're expecting. I mean, especially like if you're our age and you grew up with the late '90s, with there's a very clear Backstreet Boy parody going on in the very beginning. I think there's a lot of fun to be had with this one, and it's from the same filmmakers that did Can't Hardly Wait. In the was that late 90s? That was late 90s, wasn't it? Yeah, like 98, I think.
98.
Yeah, and they wrote the Brady Bunch movie, which is, again, another film that I think really captures satire of the genre that it's poking fun of. And then I think, watching Josie and the Pussycats as a kid, watching the trailer and being like, that looks stupid, as I thought, and a lot of people must have because nobody saw it in theaters. I would have never thought that it would be a film that would sit right at home along stuff like Zoolander or Austin Powers or Undercover Brother, like those. Just it's a parody of a music biopic type of thing,
So let me ask you this then, and I guess this is the segue into the podcast discussion. Why is it that movies like Zoolander and Undercover Brother have more stood the test of time and have more of a, not even a cult following, but more of a following? I mean, Zoolander got a sequel that wasn't even that good or well received.
You didn't see it, but it was terrible.
Yeah. Josie and the Pussycats didn't do very well at the box office, and it only really has a cult following.
Right. Well,
why do you think that is?
I know. Well, that segues really easily into, and that was good setup. That was not rehearsed, ladies and gentlemen.
And we honestly, podcast world, we actually do have like a bullet points, but most of the time we don't rehearse our podcasts.
No, it's just like, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this, and that's
we're not robots.
No, exactly. We're living, breathing podcasters sometimes. Podcasters, not living and breathing all the time. Podcasters sometimes. I know there's been a real, and it's really annoying as someone who, and I did a podcast about this like about a year ago when our daughter was really small, about how being a dad has kind of changed the way I see movies, and one of those key ways is the way I see like female representation in film, and especially in the last year or two with the whole Ghostbusters debacle, which we talked about on a previous podcast when that came out, and Wonder Woman and the Me Too movement and everything that's been going on in the industry. It's kind of crazy the way that female-led movies are treated differently, not only by critics, but also just by the public sometimes, by the way they're marketed, the way that people just tend to make assumptions about them. And I mean, I've been guilty of this too in the past. I mean, you pointed out the other day that Bad Moms, which I thought looked really ridiculous and probably wasn't going to be very good, ended up being a really fun movie. And I we just rewatched it recently. I think it's just, a symptom of the larger issue when you have all these straight white men and I'm saying this as a straight white man myself, in positions of power that are deciding what gets attention and what doesn't. And that's why 90% of the movies out there are white and 95% of them are male led. And, using Ocean's 8 as an example, I mean, films like that. And there's someone on Brandon Katz on Twitter responded to a tweet that I posted a few days ago, just seeing a lot of sexist and very misogynistic and disgusting remarks about Ocean's 8 that were just clearly aiming towards it because it's a cast full of women. And Brandon posted an interesting article that he wrote for The Observer, talking about like that female-led movies are big business in Hollywood. And last year, the top three highest grossing films were Wonder Woman, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and Beauty and the Beast. Not in that order, but
well, not to mention that the most highly talked about TV show last year was Big Little Lies.
Yeah, exactly.
And won the most awards.
Yeah, praised by critics and beloved by audiences. They're making a second season, even though there's no more books, no more like source material really. And that's a big female-led project, like spearheaded by women behind the scenes, Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman in producer roles. And despite the fact that female-led, like there's clearly, shocker, women actually want to see women on screen sometimes, and a little diversity. The fact that things like Black Panther made almost $700 million, who knew that women and minorities actually want to see women and minorities in movies every once in a while, and not just white men saving the day constantly. And I say this as a straight white man. It's it's been a long road for me personally, just to, I guess, as the kids say, get woke on this topic, because as a straight white man, I think now I'm hitting on what inspired this topic in the first place, Kai. As a straight white man, I've never questioned the lack of representation, because I didn't, I'm the audience that they were catering all this to. I'm straight white men are in running studios making movies for straight white men. So for me, it's been the last few years, especially a big growth culturally for me to seek out movies about LGBT, or seek out movies that are actually put women in positions of power and as the protagonist, and not like the love interest or the mom, or like all these different cliched roles that they normally play in movies, or African Americans or Latinos or whatever. And I think that the industry, despite the fact that they're making money, they're still reticent to embrace that. And I don't know, what do you pinpoint the cause of that being, Kai? Do you think it's just resistance to change? Do you think it's just the divisive political climate we're in now, that people are still doing that, or what do you sort of chalk that up to in films like Ocean's 8 and beyond, obviously?
Well, I don't think it's just the political climate that we're in. I mean, remember the pushback that Ghostbusters, the reboot of Ghostbusters 2, or not, the reboot what Ghostbusters had
Right.
2 summers ago. I mean, it was horrendous what critics and moviegoers were saying about this movie and the women in it. And Obama was still in office at that time, so it can't completely be pinpointed to that. And I think my opinion is that this is happening because as women and people of color are getting more power and getting less oppression, it's also the ones in power that are still trying to oppress that group more than ever before. And one way to oppress that group is to degrade them, demoralize them, resist it. And also with the modern feminist push too, that's been going on over the last several years, I think has really been scaring people. And, we have a friend that she said a few years ago that she just wished that people didn't hate women so much, and that when there's so much progress, that can be very scary to other people that don't want progress. Mm-hmm. So, women and have come a really long way in the last century. I mean, we just got rights to vote in the 20th century, and
sure.
and we're now in like the second wave of feminism, because the first wave was in the 60s, and now, the 2010s. So I think that's been really cool for me, but I think that might be why there is this resistance. And
I think it's particularly pervasive in some communities. Like if you're making a female-led version of something that people love, like Ghostbusters, or like the Ocean's movies to an extent, to a much lesser extent. I think.
Yes, much lesser extent.
Yeah, I think people were like really up in arms and protective of Ghostbusters, and part of that is because it's it's a sci-fi franchise that's held in such esteem by a lot of males, specifically white males, and that it's a sequel was being talked about forever with the original cast, and that didn't happen, and instead we got a film that basically ignores the previous films, and I think that was
but it
honestly
didn't either.
but it ignored the previous films in that those films aren't canon. I mean, they're not in continuity with those films. It's not in continuity with those other films, which I think would have kind of offset a little bit of the malevolence that was levied against that film. And
I don't think so.
Its cast. I think it would have undercut it a little bit. You don't think so? Not at all. It would have been the same.
I think that people were going to find a way to hate that movie, regardless of what they did, whether they made it canon or they didn't.
I guess that's true, and it's not. Well,
because isn't Ocean's 8 canon?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It has cameos from some of the original cast of, and by original I mean the Clooney version, obviously.
And there were actually the real cameos, not just Bill Murray's playing
playing the same characters. There's a couple of those actors were returning.
Yep, and there's still backlash. I mean, I haven't read any of the reviews or anything. Or any of the comments. I think it would really make me mad.
We should probably say, for the record, neither of us have seen the film
yet.
Right. That's why we're not talking about the quality of the film. We're just talking about sort of the response surrounding it. But I mean, I don't know what it is specifically that, and there's a lot of vitriol in the geek community in general. So I guess that extends to cinephiles, but specifically people that are into like sci-fi and fantasy and horror or comic books or whatever. That you see things like Ghostbusters, like the Ghost Bros reacting the way that they react, or let's talk about Star Wars now. The whole thing recently with Kelly Marie Tran, where people were basically harassing her on social media to the point that she just decided to close down her Instagram. Or, with Ghostbusters, people harassing and yelling racist things to Leslie Jones. It's just something about, I don't know why men are so sensitive about women actually having substantive roles in their franchises, that they just like take them and like they just decide, oh, this is an object for my abuse because I could take it out on her because she's a woman, and I guess they assume she's not going to fight back or she's less than somehow. I don't understand.
Well, this is not related to abuse, but all that hubbub that happened over the Wonder Woman private screenings.
Oh yeah.
And that we had men that were so offended that they couldn't go to these private screenings that they like got all up in arms about it. Like,
that's and then they're always like, that's prejudice to men, blah blah blah. Like, you can't, and that's the thing, you can't really, I listen to this great podcast regularly called Citizen Dame, and they, it's for female film journalists talking about things, and they point this out sometimes in regards to reverse racism, reverse sexism. You can't really oppress a group that, like, the group in power can't really be oppressed. That doesn't even make any fucking sense. How does that work? You know what I mean? It's like, if white men are in the positions of power, they can't be oppressed. They're kind of in charge. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it doesn't.
Exactly.
That by definition, that's not how it works. So, and it's weird. Like, I wonder what is the deficiency with. And this is, obviously, this is obvious, but I'll state it for any male listeners that are like, well, I'm not like that. It's like, obviously, this is not all men. There's a lot of us that are male feminists and, all about equal rights.
And that is very important to women, feminist women, because we need allies. I mean, it's the male feminists in some ways have gotten a lot of things done with sexual assault cases.
Right.
So
there are a lot of
that.
men, straight white and otherwise, that are on the right side of history when it comes to these issues, and but there's, I don't know what it is about a certain percentage, and it's usually, I mean, it's still probably a minority, but it's like a really vocal minority.
It's not the silent minority at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. I wish it was. They should be more silent, and maybe they feel emboldened by certain events in the last couple of years, or I don't know what it is, to speak out more, or they just hide behind their keyboards, like feeling like, oh, I can attack this actress because I don't like The Last Jedi or Ghostbusters, or the fact that there's a all woman heist movie. It's like, who cares, dude? Let them make the movie. You know, or let them.
Yeah,
let
why
the-
does it attack
what
your
is it-
ego so much? Like,
you-
what
you-
is the problem?
Exactly. I don't understand why they feel threatened by that. I don't know if it's some kind of insecurity thing or what's going on with that. I mean, here's another perfect example: is very few studios of this scale are led by women, but Lucasfilm has Kathleen Kennedy in that position of power, and people have constantly been saying, "Oh, should Kathleen Kennedy step down from Lucasfilm?" Blah blah blah, and now, after Solo's disappointing box office performance, there's rumors going around that she's going to resign. And I'm like,
Oh my
well,
gosh.
that's ridiculous, because one movie didn't make as much as the last three movies, which are some of the highest grossing Star Wars movies of all time, and all of which were, even though the pissed off fans, and I use fans in air quotes, wouldn't like to admit it, three of like the most critically acclaimed Star Wars movies ever made, three of the biggest box office earners in Force Awakens, Rogue One, and Last Jedi. One slight misstep, not even really a misstep, but like, instead of a home run, it's like, a solid single or double, using baseball terms that I'm not even 100% sure I'm using correctly. That really does feel, because she's a woman, that they're like, she doesn't see, women can't handle this. Look, this movie didn't do as well as it was supposed to, according
it's
to
like
them.
it's like we were talking about with before Wonder Woman came out. It's like, if Wonder Woman did not succeed, if it was a failure, then the studios would have felt reason to not make another women-led superhero film with a female director.
Right.
That would have been their excuse.
Well, especially with the female director part. I think
Right.
that's the key thing. Is and that's another issue that A Wrinkle in Time has faced, because Ava DuVernay directed that and it didn't do as well as it could have. But that's the upsetting thing when you have people of color or women of color in this case heading a studio or directing a project, is why do they have to constantly be flawless? Meanwhile, most of the shitty movies I see are directed by white guys who have made like barely any movies before this, and the studio's like, here's $100 million budget, go for it. It's like, why do they get things handed to them? Meanwhile, the people of color and the women have to fight so hard to get any kind of big break, like any of these big studio movies, franchise or Marvel or DC or whatever,
Yeah, and it's amazing. And I think the other thing conversation that spurred this podcast topic is, now that you're a father of a little girl,
Right.
you said you're more woke, and, being your wife, I would agree with that. But you had mentioned you didn't know that it was like this, and you have seemed very shocked by this behavior in the world. And I had to tell you, I said, I'm not. This is what I have dealt with
Right.
my entire life. These are the things that not necessarily to me, like I haven't heard this stuff to me being like, oh, God, you can't do that because you're a woman or whatever. In my own personal life, thankfully, I haven't felt.
But it's the environment.
In the United States,
Yeah.
right. But in the world the gender that I am, and the friends that I have, and the family relationships that I have, that I know, and that I've experienced my whole life. And so I'm not surprised by any of this, and it makes me sad, it makes me angry.
Yeah.
But I think that what's great is that there is a big group of men and women and men that want things to get better and are pushing for things to get better, and are going to keep fighting for progress.
Yeah.
Regardless of what assholes on the internet have to say,
Right.
or the studio heads that want women to step down.
And to that end, it does look like Ocean's 8 is going to do pretty well this weekend. So that's a good sign that we'll probably get an Ocean's 9 soon and an Ocean's 10, and then they'll link up to the other to the other trilogy.
Well, look what happened with Sex and the City. And yeah, those two movies are not that great.
Right.
But I was one of those women that went to see those two movies with my girlfriends. And we made an event, and we dressed up, and we went to lunch afterwards, and we were like girls going to see our Sex and the City movie.
Right.
And that movie did really, really well because of that.
Or something like Bridesmaids, which had a similar $150 or whatever $1 million it made, nominated for Oscars and everything. It's, like I said, it's shockingly, women and people of color will go see movies starring and directed by women and people of color. Because, everybody, that's the thing. As a straight white man raised in suburbia, and, I didn't really face much oppression. I've been very fortunate in that. And so to see that women and people of color have to deal with this kind of thing and don't feel like they're not represented on screen in the way that I've been lucky enough to see. That makes me sad, and that's why movies like Wonder Woman or Black Panther or Ghostbusters, like I feel that for my daughter's future, for other people, for other cultures and other, people of color and things like that. And of course, I should clarify, not to say that you need to have a daughter in order to be a decent human being, because I was already, compassionate in general, but I wasn't as attuned to. I'm not, like, now I'm really sensitive to those issues because I have a daughter. It just kind of amped it up even more so, Part of that's growing up, part of that's being married, and being in a close relationship with a strong woman. Part of that's now trying to raise a strong woman, and I'm more aware of trying to expose her to things that show girls in a positive light.
And I think that there are also people, men and women included, that don't have all those factors in place, or even one of them, that they aren't woke no matter what happens, because you mentioned upbringing, like maybe their mother was anti-women too, right. Their father was anti-women, or they had, and because of that, then they have a daughter and they don't care about her being strong because they marry an anti-woman woman. So there's also those factors in play too,
right?
That you kind of, I think, I think that being married to a strong woman definitely more helped you with that, and then the daughter part of it. But yeah, a lot of men can't necessarily say that, and so a lot of women can't say that either.
Right, and that's a dynamic that a lot of individuals, families, couples, whatever, aren't even aware of, that they react that way. But they're like, Black Panther, I don't know, doesn't look like it's for me. Why? For some undefined reason, because they're not used to seeing, an all-black cast, because it's set in another country that's not one that or a culture that they're familiar with. You know what I mean? And a lot of people have sort of a abrasiveness to films that don't feature people, especially, and I'm talking mostly about white men, obviously, but even women, like you're saying, white women or any women in general could also have that same sort of like, I don't want to see women in the front. I'm so used to the other thing. And they're just not 100% aware of that we've been so conditioned to seeing, well, white men, it's Tom Cruise, it's, Chris Evans or whatever. It's always, that's kind of the way it is, with rare exceptions. You have your Denzels and your Will Smith and your like Julia Roberts and stuff. But by and large, it's always white men leading these films. And if the women are in it, they're usually like supporting roles and like kind of subservient on a narrative level to the male stars. And I think that's important for me as a film critic to seek out movies starring women and people of color, and with them behind the scenes as well. And even just as someone that listens to a lot of podcasts, I listen, as I mentioned, Citizen Dame, and then there's a great one called Black Men Can't Jump in Hollywood that looks at films from an African American perspective, and like for diversity and race. And I think it's good to expose yourself to different cultures, different voices, because it makes you, not only does it make you more compassionate for the people around you, but it makes you develop more as a person, and you evolve spiritually in a way, just being exposed to other representation on screen other than the mainstream, what you're used to, staying in your own little box, because that's the only way in movies, in life in general, that's the only way you grow, is by, well, let me put myself out there, let me visit another country, let me try this new dish at this restaurant, or let me watch a film or listen to a song or read a book by someone that's totally different from me, not staying, well, I read John Grisham books and I watch horror movies and I eat pizza and that's pretty much my life. I'm like, well, there's so much out there to experience. It's why limit yourself that way when you could develop a more of appreciation for the world around you and the people around you by being a little more adventurous and, I guess, in air quotes, brave enough to step outside your comfort zone.
Yeah. Exactly. So, that was a pretty.
I didn't mean to get so long-winded there, but
no, and we've talked about that before.
It's a topic that we're both passionate about.
And I I agree with that sentiment. I mean, I'm not a film critic or anything like that, but I think I do agree with you that it's good to delve into different areas that you're not accustomed to.
Right.
You get a feel for that. And I mean, that's one of the reasons that I love to travel, is when I've traveled, I've met people from all over the world, and I get a different perspective on their lives and their culture and their accents, and ultimately one thing I've learned is that we are all the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we all share very common threads, and just take away where we come from and our parents, we're pretty much all the same. We're all humans, and we all want to be happy and be loved by people.
Right. And just like being someone that actually comments and stirs up discussion and puts his opinion out on culture. That's why I feel like I try and approach everything I write and everything I see from a perspective of like, well, especially if I'm reviewing a film led by a woman or whatever. Like, there's, after the whole thing with Harry Knowles of Ain't It Cool News came out, I didn't even realize this because I never really followed the site very heavily, but a lot of his film reviews were very like gross descriptions of the woman body and like certain scenes and how they're like sexy or gross or whatever. And I'm like, dude, why are you, if it was a man, you wouldn't be writing descriptions, like physical descriptions of things. Or Brandon in his article that I should put in the show notes, I don't know if I mentioned that, posted like people's comments on the Tomb Raider movie about somebody being like, do I have to be the one to say that Alicia Vikander's breasts are too small to play Lara Croft or things like that? I'm like, nobody's saying that, like, I don't know, Jamie Foxx's dick is too small to play Spawn. I mean, why are we talking about this? What
and it's also
when
even and this is kind of a sidestep, but with comic books with women,
right?
I mean, they're so exaggeratedly drawn to begin with.
Well,
like, no woman looks like that, and that is disgusting to degrade a woman that way, and a real woman who, the depiction in the comic book is complete fantasy.
That's a totally separate issue.
And it's another way to oppress women.
Yeah, so, because those are all drawn and written for male audiences, so they just so the women are always very sexualized, and I think that doesn't help the whole issue in the geek community of viewing just women as sexual objects, and questioning, well, why should they be in a position of power as a Ghostbuster or an Amazon princess or whatever. So I don't know. It's what can we do to make this better? I guess it's just like I said, expose yourself to more things and try and develop your compassion for others, and try and go out of your way to go seek out a film directed by a woman, or seek out a movie, to market it towards the African American community, or with Asian influence, or whatever. And that's why I feel like there's been so many great movies just recently between Black Panther, Wonder Woman, and like something like Coco, which is all Latino. I think that I feel like some studios and some television networks and some things are getting there. Like I don't know, it's probably just by force of, because they've seen that there's an audience for it, and it's just the commerce of it. Well, look, people went to see this, so I guess we should make more of that. And so I mean, that's really the best thing that people listening can do, is expand your horizons, take a chance on things, and if you want to be supportive of something, if you want more Black superheroes, go see Black Panther, or go see Spawn when it comes out, or go see if you want to see more female-led franchises and such, go see Ocean's 8. Pay with your dollars, because that's what Hollywood listens to. And some studios are making more. I think Disney is making steps with things like Moana, and trying to diversify the Star Wars franchise, which has never really had a very, very much of a female or person of color perspective before. So would you agree that that's basically the best way to go out there and support those projects, and try and find other voices to add to your repertoire of things you've experienced?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to add on to that, kind of more of a general statement, is when it comes to progress for women, for people of color, remember that it's not a competition. Just because someone gets something doesn't mean that it's taking something away from someone
Exactly.
else. There is enough to go around. There's enough movies in Hollywood being made that don't feature women or people of color, that it's not taking anything away from you or from a person, and to give other people a chance in a lot of other ways. Everybody can win in life.
It's telling that when a film minority or female led comes out, and then and it's well done, I'm like, geez, this feels really fresh. Why does this feel really fresh? I'm like, oh, because it's the first movie I've ever seen with a person that looks like that in the lead. And it's I think not only is it good culturally for that purpose, I think it's good creatively, artistically. Think of all the stories that haven't been told because it's about a woman, or it's about a black person, or an Asian person, or a Latin person. You know what I mean? I think now is the time for that, especially with everything that's going on. Like they said, the Me Too movement and all that stuff. People are starting to realize, hey, we're all the same. Like you were saying, and like at sort of the closing monologue in Black Panther, that we're all one tribe. We're all people. We're all trying to live our lives, going to job, raising our kids, paying our bills, wiping our ass. We're all doing the same thing. Our bodies might look different, have different colors, we might sound differently, but we all put our pants on one leg at a time, as the saying goes. We all have a heartbeat. We all have emotions, and people need to keep that kind of thing in mind before they be like, I hate The Last Jedi. I'm going to make this actress's life a living hell for no reason. She's just a human being who's living her life. You hate the movie, then don't watch it. Move on to something else. Let those of us that enjoy it, and stop being a dick about it. So, I feel like that's kind of I feel like that was basically my closing thoughts.
Yeah, it did seem like that was where you were going, and I mean, I don't know what else we can add to this other than saying our piece. But yeah, it's just, I think it was good to have a podcast with a male and a female with perspectives.
Well, and that's part of the reason I wanted you on the specific episode, is that I wanted to. It felt it adds another voice to this conversation. Otherwise, it would have felt sort of disingenuous to have this conversation, which is like, hey, I'm a white man, and I'm going to tell you what we need to do, everybody else out there. You know what I mean?
Well, one thing I wanted to add, when we were talking about physical, with that critic that was talking about females' bodies, and you actually call me out on this, and I'm trying to stop it. I do say remarks about women in movies and how they look, and I'm not doing that to be demeaning. I don't know. Maybe it's just habit from my own upbringing, because even in my own upbringing, I've been around other women that have been demeaning to females, whether it's on the red carpet or in movies, TV shows, and that's not a good habit for me to have. So I'm really glad that you call me out and say, hey, why do what was the point of you even saying that about that actress? Because I don't want to be anti-woman, because I'm not. More pro-woman than ever before, probably also because of having a daughter and all that, and want to be part of the feminist movement. But so even I'm trying to be aware of that too, to break those cycles.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like me growing up, like it seeps into the culture. You don't even think about it, or you're like programmed to see things a certain way because that's, I don't know, just how that's what you're exposed to in the world, or just through whatever media you're taking in. And I think everybody just needs to take a step back, think critically. Why do I feel this way about this? Is there another way to be more inclusive and diverse in the way I see the world? Movies, this is a podcast about movies, but it's symptomatic of a much larger issue that really expands to all elements of our society, and not just as a nation but as a world. And I like to quote this a lot, but Roger Ebert says famously that films are empathy machines, basically, and that you appreciate others, and you learn about people's cultures, other people's lives. Basically, you get to step in someone's shoes for 2 hours and experience the world through their eyes. And I think that's what's sort of powerful about art, but cinema in particular. So, any other thoughts on your end?
Yes, and the other one another point that I wanted to add is that I think sometimes the issues that the studio heads have with making a film with women or people of color is that there are concerns that they're not going to make money on the movie. And as this is a worthwhile concern, but a lot of the feedback from moviegoers is to say, well, how can I relate to this person? How can I relate to this black person? I'm white, like I don't have their same experiences. Or they'll say, well, and you're kind of guilty of this too, but not like it's not that bad. Where you watch a movie with female actresses and they're telling their story, and and a person would say, okay, how can I relate to this story? I'm not a female, like
right.
This is not my story. Meanwhile, like I'll watch a movie like Brave, like Brave is a good example, and I'm like sobbing at the end of that movie,
right?
Because it did resonate with me more with having a mother and being having a mother-daughter relationship, and
right.
You kind of didn't feel that same emotion because you have a mother-son relationship,
right?
And
it's a subjectivity.
And I think that's sometimes some of the problems too.
It's also that's a subjectivity of art. Like, you might relate to a certain way to a certain film more because you see yourself reflected in either the story or the characters or something else.
But the thing is, though, you have a lot of the moviegoers that are showing their dollars are straight white males,
right?
Then no wonder they don't see themselves in any of the stories and it doesn't feel relatable to them because they're the ones that are buying the tickets.
Sometimes, but they're also the ones making the decisions about what movies get greenlit. That's what I'm saying. I think that's the problem, is that the people that are making the decisions, the shot callers, as it were, are straight white men that are like, well, I don't get this. I don't know how to sell this. But this one, where the woman is like this, the female lead is like the love interest of the male and it's very sexual or whatever, that I understand. He's like the hero and she's hot and wants to be with him.
Pretty much.
I'm assuming that's how most studio meetings go, which is why, so, I don't know. It's a work in progress. So go out there, see Ocean's 8 if you want more of that. See Hereditary, which is a great film. And we have a review on crookedtable.com for that. And it's also female-led, which is an amazing performance by Toni Collette. I mean, there's a lot of great work being done out there, and it does feel like we're taking baby steps. So that's encouraging, at least. Would you agree?
Yep, I do agree.
So I think that's pretty much all we have for now. If you like what we're doing here on the Crooked Table podcast, please consider contributing to our Patreon page at patreon.com/crookedtable. You can also rate and review us on iTunes to help others find the show. You can find me, Robert Yaniz Jr., on Twitter at Crooked Table.
And you can find me, Kai Yaniz, on twitter.com at the Volkey LLC. And you can also find me on YouTube on the Kai Yaniz. Under Kai Yaniz, I have some inspirational videos that I post weekly.
It's 5 minutes of inspiration. They can handle that.
Yeah. Yes.
Of course, you can find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until then, next time, I've been Rob.
And I'm Kai.
We'll catch you around the table next week. Roll credits.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
C-R-O-O-K-E-D.